Big topic, a big pertinent topic for the day as well. And we've got our speakers all set. Once again, I request all the ones who are still standing in the aisle area, very quickly, please take your seats. Now, as we all understand that new coalitions and strategic groupings, these are redefining international engagements, which is why this particular session explores how flexible alliances can coexist with multilateral institutions in ensuring stability and cooperation. So that being said, first up, to spearhead the session, to take the session forward, we have with us Shreya Upadhyay, journalist with WION, and she's known for her sharp coverage of international affairs, geopolitics, and global economic developments. So firstly, if I could please invite Shreya Upadhyay to please come on stage so that we can gear up and get the session started. I'm going to request, meanwhile, all the ones who are still standing to very quickly take your seats. Well, up next, let me please invite well-revered author and academician. We have with us Dr. Chirayu Thakkar, who is a very distinguished international relations researcher and a policy expert as well. Thank you so much. I'd like to please invite you to join in. Marching ahead, we have with us Arundika Fernando, former Member of Parliament of Sri Lanka. If I may also please invite you, sir, to please join in. He's actively contributed to legislative and development initiatives focused on strengthening economic growth. We march ahead to also invite our next speaker. We have with us Chandra Arya, former Member of Parliament, Canada, who's widely recognized for his work in strengthening Canada-India ties. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. May I now please invite Rahul Kumar, who's the first politician of Indian origin elected in the Frankfurt Parliament, making it a significant milestone in Germany's democratic and multicultural landscape. Thank you very much for joining in. May I also please invite, we have with us none other than Ambassador Ruchira Kamboj, former permanent representative of India to the United Nations and former president of the United Nations Security Council.
Thank you so much. Namaste, everybody. We had quite a conversation, a session with Minister Piyush Goyal, and I think he set the stage for a lot of things. For the theme of our session this afternoon, which is multilateralism in a fragmented world. And what a time, what a moment to talk about multilateralism and a fragmented world together with the kind of geopolitical situation that we are seeing at the moment and grappling with. Welcome to all of you. A splendid panel that we have today. Let me start by asking you, Chirayu, since you're somebody who's, who's well-read in the history of global orders, how do you see the situation at the moment? Is it evolving? Is it, bruised? Is it just, going on to a completely new world order at the moment?
Hello. Shreya, thank you for the question. I think you burdened me with the scene-setting question. So, look, as a student of global orders and student of international history, I think on the larger canvas of history, multilateralism is a very new phenomenon. Because starting from Westphalia all the way to the Congress of Vienna, it was only 4 or 5 powers who sat across the table, probably much smaller than this, and they decided world affairs on most issues. It's only when the 3 old men sat in Yalta, they decided that we'll also involve the international community together. And the very premise of multilateralism was that the top of the pyramid and the bottom of the pyramid, they were in an unequal arrangement. What Stephen Krasner says, organized hypocrisy. So the bottom knew that the favors are skewed for the top of the pyramid, but they were okay to participate. And they granted the legitimacy to the order. Now what has happened is, and for the sake of metaphor, just yesterday we were talking on the flight, for the sake of metaphor, the benefits were 70-30. Whether you take WTO, whether you take the disarmament thing, whether you take UN Security Council, it was never a relationship of equals. It was an unequal arrangement, but something that was acceptable to all sides. Now, what has happened is that, for the sake of, again, metaphor 70-30, now that balance that stayed for very long in the entire post-war period, it shakes a little bit, and all of a sudden, in the Western Hemisphere, you see a new narrative, a new discourse coming up where the maximum beneficiaries of multilateralism, the maximum beneficiaries of global order, of globalization, they start perpetrating themselves as the victim of the order. And that is where, and again, you know, a favorite phrase that is going around today is Trumpian chaos. But I think that is only a symptom of something that is going on, and probably Chandra can speak on that. It's that all of a sudden they start feeling that we have got a raw deal. In fact, it was the bottom of the pyramid that got the raw deal. Okay. So just quick, one line, and I know a lot of people have to speak. But you asked me the question is this a rupture? I think the very premise is shaken on the one hand. On the other hand, you have another power which literally believes itself to the middle kingdom, so which doesn't even want to give this raw deal. And the bottom of the pyramid is still there in the quest of finding a solution, finding an old equilibrium.
Okay, and so let me take this point across to Ambassador Kamboj. Ambassador Kamboj, you've been at the United Nations. In fact, you were the first woman representative at the United Nations for India. You know, when we talk about Global South, like Chirayu said, that the bottom of the pyramid, the side that didn't get much of the benefits of the multilateralism isn't complaining. It's the ones who actually got the most benefit of it. When we talk about Global South, how are we seeing it, this entire situation play out? Is the multilateralism that we knew broken completely? Is it just bruised? Or is it just now aligning to a new world order, which would be long-term?
Yeah. Thank you very much. A pleasure to be in your program, and my greetings to the audience. Well, first and foremost, let's be honest. There is a crisis of multilateralism today, without a doubt. In fact, there was a recent detail that I read, the Global Cooperation Barometer, which states very clearly that since 2019, multilateralism has declined 20%. Now, what does that mean? That simply means that the Security Council is passing fewer resolutions. There are fewer peacekeeping operations that are being mounted. There are fewer peacekeeping personnel that are being deployed. And countries are not channeling finances through multilateralism, but doing so bilaterally. So there is no doubt there is a crisis. Why is there a crisis? We all know that. That is because the Security Council is gridlocked. It is unable to pass any resolution. And if you just look at Ukraine and Gaza, you will understand the situation very, very clearly. I remember in Ukraine, one of the P5 countries itself was a party to the conflict, quite extraordinary. And in the case of Gaza, another P5 country managed to successfully veto all resolutions, leading to a complete crisis. Let's take a look at Venezuela. Did the Security Council meet? Yes, it did. It met an emergency session. But did it adopt or pass any resolution? No, it didn't. So it is now being used more as a signaling platform rather than as a platform where resolutions emanate. That said, and having drawn everyone's attention to the crisis of multilateralism, which is quite evident, the peace and security mandate of the UN has failed quite spectacularly. It must be said that there is another United Nations. The World Food Programme, UNICEF, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and so forth. Now, many of these agencies or sectoral bodies are doing excellent work on the ground. Humanitarian operations, peace support operations, feeding 150 million people by one statistic every year, sheltering millions, vaccinating millions. And for the smaller countries, I want to draw everyone's attention to this fact. For the smaller countries, this really means, this is really a huge deal. And when we talk about the small states, please remember that they make up 56% of the UN's total membership. If I'm not wrong, there are 108 small states. For these states, feeding a child in Sudan, taking care of refugees, vaccinating children, that really makes a difference. So the smaller states are not ready to abandon the United Nations. So to cut the long story short, since time is short, what I will say is the way forward is not to abandon multilateralism, even though I know it is very trendy now to talk about minilaterals. the way forward is to reform it. And India has been very clear. I will just reiterate that very quickly. We support a reformed multilateralism and a multilateralism that delivers on the ground. Back to you.
Can I then ask Mr. Chandra Arya, you come from Canada, sir. Canada is grappling with the United States of America, pressuring it to become its 51st state. And your Prime Minister, Mark Carney, just gave a very fiery speech a few days back. How is Canada and that part of the world really taking this in and responding? Because, of course, there is a lot of pressure that is being created aggressively, subtly, in all sorts of ways. How is Canada and the North American, perception really dealing with it?
Before coming to that, let me just quickly touch on these multilateral agencies like the United Nations and WTO. They were set up in a different era for a different need. First, to prevent the wars, and second, to expand international trade. They were based on the consensus. So those fundamental things have changed now. Now, semiconductors is new oil, things like that have changed. So, as Ambassador Kamboj said, we can't wish away the multilateral institutions, though minilateral institutions like Quad are coming up. But I think going forward, we will have a new definitions, new sort of institutions, but multilateral institutions will continue to exist. Coming to Canada, US, and the entire world, you know what, one of the good things that happened with the election of Donald Trump as president is that he has kicked us in the butt. We were so dependent on the US for so many years. 74% of our trade, the trade between Canada and US, 74% of our trade was with the US. So we were sort of in the comfort zone. Now we have woken up along with other countries like Europe and other countries. Now we have started looking where exactly is the world today. The world is in South Asia and Southeast Asia. If you look at the demographics, if you look at the economic growth, if you look at the population growth, in every single parameter, every single indicator is South Asia and Southeast Asia that is coming to prominence. Now, Europe, Canada, and other countries have woken up to the fact that we have to diversify. Now they are recognizing the need to have good relations, good political relations, good economic relations, not because they are doing anybody a favor, because it is in our national interest, it is in our economic interest, it is in our geopolitical interest that we have got good relations. We should have good relations with countries like India, Southeast Asia, etc.
I want to take this across to Mr. Rahul Kumar. Mr. Kumar, do you agree with what Mr. Arya is saying, that Europe has also been given that perhaps rude nudge, rude push by Donald Trump, the American president, to just not be solely dependent on one country?
Yeah, let me first say Namaskar, Jai Hind to everybody. India is my home country, my Janam Bhumi, and Germany is my Karam Bhumi. And let me make it short and easy, that Europe is still united. If there is any problem, Europe stands together. And not from now, it has happened from all the past years and many, many years before. Look like you have mentioned the Ukrainians. So Europe and Germany was one of the first who have give them enough possibility to come to Germany and work there and give them all the possibilities. And there was that time also a pressure, and right now there is a pressure, but I feel Europe is sticking more together, and they are not taking any pressure because they are finding solutions in their own home. And Frankfurt is a main part of it, because like in India it's Mumbai, so in Germany it's Frankfurt, who is the financial hub there. And it's had an impact, whatever has in Europe comes to Germany and has an important impact of Frankfurt. And we want to give them good possibilities for growth and also for jobs. And that's why it's important to work with Europe.
Okay, Teresa, you want to come in on this?
Yes, thank you. Because I'm also a German citizen, I wanted to comment on this, and I couldn't agree more that Germany is standing much more together than it seems. Of course, we do have our struggles but I think we are finding our strength again. And as the minister said, we need to promote our strength and not only our struggles. And I think the struggles are these days a little bit overrepresented. I'm just coming from Munich. We had the Munich Security Conference. And to point to the diversity factor, it is so true. So the Munich Security Conference used to be a very transatlantic focused event.
Yeah.
And especially this year, we had a huge delegation from India, and the Indian delegation had a lot of focus. So the next day, my firm was hosting a recap event, and Mr. Ischinger and people from your government were there too, and he, the face of the Munich Security Conference, emphasized how important it is that we do also events with India, in India, and there's a really strong relationship. So the Munich Security Conference is diversifying and Europe is diversifying. So it's just, this is just a sign of this.
So Teresa, are you telling me that the United States of America at the moment isn't as big a villain as it is being made out to be because it is helping countries diversify and look at each other?
I think you do not have to weaken the one relationship, but can also find new friends at the same time.
That's just a great way of, paving your way through a complicated question. But Mr. Fernando, when we talk about struggles and strengths, smaller countries like Sri Lanka, how are they seeing this realignment? You want to call it chaos, you want to call it evolution of global order, call it as it may be. How are you viewing this? Is it going to be a struggle for a country like yours, or is it going to be an opportunity to perhaps realign with bigger powers?
Thanks, Riha. Before that, let me thank the organizers for inviting us. And I was the Minister of Tourism, Plantation and Urban Development in Sri Lanka for 15 years. So with my experience, I can tell you without multiple partners, it's very difficult for us, for a developing country. When you say small countries, even though we are small in size, we have a lot of things in it, we are very, if you take Sri Lanka, it's one of the preferred islands when it comes to tourism. We have all these minerals and the culture that we had 2,000 years, 500 years old culture. When you take now the Sri Lanka and India, a lot of things in common, like Ramayana, where the most precious Hindu religion, if you take in the Hindu religion, most sacred places are in Sri Lanka. So the culture-wise and with all the uniqueness, even though we are size in small, and we are in the Silk Route too. You remember that now, about 4 or 5 days back, we had India-Pakistan cricket match in Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
So the Sri Lanka is a country where we have everything, but only thing is without multiple relationship, without this the support from the other countries. Even though we can say there are countries from their size, the countries are big, but then again, but all these countries have their mutual interest. They should have the relationship. They should have the brotherhood and everything. This is the time, as you mentioned, this is the time that we need all that. So we need their support as well. Not only support, it has to be an exchange between the bigger nations and the smaller nations. So I think this is very good. Like if you take India, India has always supported Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
We had an economic crisis about 1 or 2 years back. India is the neighboring country, helped Sri Lanka. So that's what, we always have these organizations like Commonwealth, United Nations, SAARC, all that. Okay. So in that, we need all these for the future.
Okay. Radha, you've just attended the World Economic Forum at Davos. That is a convergence of the entire world. And at a time when trade is being used to put pressure on countries to get your way around, what is the general sense that you got there? What's the general sentiment of what people think of this entire situation at the moment?
So I think the world is definitely in crisis, as we are talking about it here. And one of the things you do when you're in crisis is you adapt. Just like we did in bringing this panel together. We were late in time and we fused the two panels. So I think that is something which was clearly on display in Davos, whether it was listening to Mr. Trump go on and seeing the crisis play out in front of your eyes, or it was seeing Mr. Mark Carney, amazingly, pitch a different kind of world where we're collaborating and, the second middle forces coming together, which is, I think, was really good to see, and I can see that, with this forum, we're trying to do exactly that. So, that was one. I come to this table today from philanthropy. I, have been on the impact side and I've worked closely there. That also brings, I think, philanthropy into the lens, and, like the minister here was mentioning, that programs like the UN and, supportive programs, because, in this whole world where everybody is looking out for themselves, there is a large section of society that is being ignored, that is really suffering at the cost of all of these decisions. And, multilateral organizations supporting on the ground is, where there is some hope. So,
Well, hope is what we move forward with. The hope is what we go on with. Ambassador Kamboj, I also want to talk about not just organizations like the United Nations, but groupings as well, whether we talk about the Quad, whether we talk about BRICS, or where we talk about the latest Pax Silica, which has been made under the Trump administration. From India's point of view, where do we stand in the kind of geopolitical churn that we are grappling with at the moment? What importance do these regional groupings hold? Because we've seen with the United Nations, there is, as you said, reforms that are needed, desperate reforms that are needed to be more inclusive. But as far as these groupings are concerned, what is and what should be our point of view then?
No, I think that's a very useful question, because what we are seeing today, rather the flavor of the day really are the minilateral groupings. And there are many reasons why they have become the flavor of the day. Quite simply because multilateralism is not working as far as the peace and security agenda is concerned. So therefore you have countries that group together around issues. Now these countries group together around issues and are bound by issues, not by shared values. That's the difference. That's a very crucial difference. So there are many advantages of minilaterals, as you know. They are quick, they are nimble, and countries can press ahead with solutions, even as multilateralism is slow and very often comes up with the least common denominator solution, which is not the best solution. So I can see why they are so popular and why they are the flavor of the day. As far as India is concerned, we are members of many minilaterals and plurilaterals. I don't have a number, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's at least 20 plus. And there are many other countries that are members of 20 plus minilaterals. But one thing I do want to caution you, as since Chirayu went back into history, minilaterals are not new. You recall the Concert of Europe, 1815? After Napoleon was defeated, there were 5 great powers then: Britain, Russia, Prussia, Austria, and France. They used to meet from time to time, periodically, to review the situation within Europe and, importantly, retain the balance of power. It worked for about 40 years. So similarly, today you have the I2U2, you have the Quad, you have the Pax Silica, and so forth. But what I would like to say is that, useful as they are, minilaterals are exclusionary. They do not house the entire member states. The UN is the only universal institution. It's another matter that many parts of the UN are not working. But let's face it, the house is the same. Now everyone's entering through the side door. Minilaterals are workarounds. As far as India's position is concerned, look, all of us know, no surprises here, we are committed multilateralists. We were among the founding members, but more importantly, we set the normative agenda of the United Nations right from the very beginning. And that's not a trifling matter. If you look at the entire anti-colonialism agenda, India led that. The fight against apartheid, India was at the forefront. Disarmament, peacekeeping, the safety and security of peacekeepers, the counter-terrorism agenda, and today, a reformed multilateralism and a multilateralism that works. So I see India sticking to multilateralism, but naturally, however, at the same time, we are members of various minilaterals, and we are straddling both spheres, as are most countries. So there's nothing surprising about that.
Okay.
The problem is that one is working and the other is not. Both need to work.
Ambassador Kamboj, help me understand this then. Why is it a problem if countries are coming together on the basis of issues, if not shared values? You've got issues and you're coming together on that. Isn't that a long-term way forward? Is that a problem?
Not at all. It's not a problem. In fact, it is the flavor of the moment. Because multilateralism is slow, because multilateralism is just not working as far as the peace and security mandate is concerned, so these minilaterals or plurilaterals, they are workarounds. And I think it's a positive development. Like you, countries come together because of shared interests. May not be shared values, but because of shared interests. And it's working very well. If a country, if a grouping wants to send vaccines somewhere, it sends them. If you want to do something else, you do that. Whereas, as I said, multilateralism is slow, and very often you have the least common denominator solution, which is not the best. However, that said, it is very important. It is not a black and white question. That said, it is also important to stress that minilaterals have their limitations. They are not universal, and that is where multilateralism is still required, because to forge common solutions to global problems, like biological weapons, nuclear weapons, like pandemics, you need multilateralism. So India is doing both. India is a committed multilateralist, but India stands for a reformed multilateralism. I don't think I'll explain that. Everyone knows that. And also a multilateralism that works. Delivery is very important.
You know, since we're talking about issues, Mr. Arya, one of the biggest and the most contentious issues between India and Canada has been the issue of Khalistani separatism. While we are at a time, you know, where countries are coming together, calling themselves coalition of the willing, how far can India and Canada actually work together on that?
I think Canada and India have worked together for a long time. The disagreement was profound since 2015, since the party which I was part of came to power in 2015. The issue of Khalistan, let me address it up front. Khalistan is a sort of romantic idea for few people. For few people, it's a political idea. And for few people, that gives them their umbrella to continue to do the things that are basically criminal in nature. That issue is not going to die. The only reason Khalistan is still an issue because of the political patronage from the political system in Canada, and that is not going to go away. However, the current government, it has made clear to India and world that the greater national objectives, the economic objectives of Canada, the national interest of Canada, the geopolitical interests of Canada is far more important than a tiny, tiny fraction of the people who advocate for things like Khalistan. So I'm glad that the government of Canada has woken up, and through the statements, through the visits, through the bilateral dialogues that are taking place, they have very clearly shown that they understand the need for Canada and India to cooperate together. There are no other better countries than Canada and India. Both are multicultural, both are democratic, both adhere to the rule of law, and both are English-speaking part of Commonwealth. So Canada has got things that India needs. We are an energy superpower. India needs energy. Canada is rich in minerals and metals, and India needs that. India is a big source of talent that Canada needs. There's no other better partners when it comes to mutual cooperation. And that has been recognized, thankfully, and things are progressing well. Prime Minister Carney will be here in a couple of weeks. We see much more very solid agreements between Canada and, we have been talking about free trade agreement for a long time, but while awaiting that, there's a lot of sector-wise agreements we foresee.
Okay. Mr. Kumar, since we're talking about trade agreements, India and Europe have just signed what is being called the mother of all deals. What are some of the other areas that you think that the two sides can cooperate on? This is, a great moment to actually converge and sort of have these pacts on various areas of cooperation?
I think cooperation is a very big topic, and if you start sharing your values, the door is open for every time new corporations. And Europe is ready to make new engagements. There are a lot of challenges, but I think we don't focus on the problems. The problems will never end. We have to focus on solutions. And this I have seen in the previous session, what Narendra Modi ji is doing with sharing the values to the people, sharing values to the nation. This has a deep impact. Like the German Chancellor have visited India a few weeks ago, and they have made new partnership. So the values are very important. I have seen this in the previous panel. Piyush ji said, Vijay ji said, that we have to share values. If we create friendships, there will be new eras and new projects, and this will be good for both of the countries. So I believe to create new friendships, this will be a door opener. If you create trust, if you create this kind of friendship, then every project, everything you can fulfill without a lot of problems.
Okay. Mr. Fernando, sorry?
From Europe, you're seeing a very successful ongoing visit,
Yes.
which has very concrete outcomes.
Yes.
Can it get better?
You know, which is why, ma'am, I'm saying, are we blaming the villain too much? Are we making a villain out of a country and a person too much? Because he's really nudging all of us to look at each other and diversify. But Mr. Fernando, you know, when we talk about Sri Lanka, how does it perceive the fact that a lot of countries are now getting into big agreements like, for example, Pax Silica, then you've got the IMEC, you've got BRI already. Where does Sri Lanka place itself then?
Present government of Sri Lanka, the present government got a big majority with the election. And the countries, now the president is very liberal and open. We are inviting all the investors to come. As I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of things in Sri Lanka, like tourism, minerals, all that. But let me tell something about what, Madam, you said. You can have hundreds of multilateral organizations, but it's no point if one or two strong nations dominates. So all the nations should have equal. So this is what we lack now. So I think there should be some kind of reforms in these multilateral organizations, especially United Nations. So coming back to this, the war in other countries, civil war in Ukraine and Gaza. So these are the things that we have to look into. And like countries like Sri Lanka, we are, of course, like we suffered 30 years of civil war. Yeah. And after that, now only we have overcome, and it's situated in the Silk Route and a lot of connectivity too. We have, it's like a hub. We have built a big airport in the southern province of Sri Lanka and also the port. So we are looking for connectivity, and Sri Lanka is open now for new development.
Okay. You know, before I close this session, I want to give the closing remarks to Chirayu, just like I gave you the opening question. You know, we're talking about a fragmented world, about multilateralism, but we're also seeing a time when every country has a sentiment of my country first, and it's being put out aggressively, assertively, and in your face. You've also got simultaneously technology shifts that are happening around the world. There is a race that is happening in tech, in AI, and therefore from a broken multilateralism and an evolving multilateralism, what is the kind of global configuration that we are moving towards? What are we looking at?
So, Shreya, thank you again for burdening me with closing remarks. See, the very birth of multilateralism is a product of 400 years of European experiment with my country first. Let's get that clear. It's just that we are forgetting the lessons of history, that we are now again circling back to that era where my country is first. The problem with minilateralism, see, usually it is pitted in classrooms, in this discussions, minilateralism versus multilateralism. Minilateralism and multilateralism has always coexisted. If you look at the IO literature, there have been around 200 organizations that have operated as coalitions of the willing on smaller issues in parallel to the UN. The problem is not that coexistence of minilateralism versus multilateralism. The problem is that there is an increasing deficit in multilateralism. Increasingly, the agenda is shifting. You look gradually at the output of the UN. How many treaties were produced in 80s and 90s and early 2000s, and how many treaties are we producing right now? In fact, the old treaties, talk about US and Russia, the old treaties that were in existence, there is not the willingness to produce that. You talk about polar regions. Greenland is in favor. Polar regions is again an important question where there is no UN sanctioned treaty. And the reason we are worried is that when all the countries came together, even though not every country had equity in everything, they granted the legitimacy by being in the UN, by signing on a UNGA resolution that we are in this together. This is the principle that international society endorses. And the problem is that increasingly that agenda is shifting towards that. Now, either there is politicization, so you have Pax Silica on one hand, you have BRI on the other hand, so the global technological order is divided. There are so many other issues where, there's a trust deficit between democracies and others, and so on and so forth. So the problem is not that minilateralism and multilateralism cannot coexist. The problem is that multilateralism's agenda is increasingly shrinking. The appetite of the global community to sit together, set norms, and then make sure that everybody abides by it, that is decreasing. And that's a problem for the future. And you asked me about what global configurations are emerging. I'll give 3 quick things in mind. A, the US comes back to multilateralism. And it will happen because either the domestic discourse will change, that's one reason. The another thing is that what I started with, that, this portrayal of beneficiaries as victims, if that reverses, and again America starts thinking that we were the beneficiaries, if that discourse comes back, probably the faith in multilateralism will come back. The second is if China becomes too assertive and too powerful, they may not do out of inherent virtuosity. But if you see too much of prominence, America has always been anxious that nobody should be prominent. So I think that might bring back their faith in multilateralism. And
do you think, Chirayu, this will end if we, when we see the Trump presidency end?
Well, I genuinely would not go into the business of prognosis, and I wish there was a crystal ball in my hand where I could guess that. There's one final thing. Let us not take, just 1 minute, let us not take this for granted. League was formed in 1920, and the membership start shrinking by 1933, and come 1937, major members were out of the league, and league was hollowed out. So the third and the final thing is, since ma'am referred to the French president being here, if the middle powers, they reinvent their role, the India, the France, and ma'am was talking that we were committed multilateralists. I'll just like to quote Vikram Doraiswamy, our High Commissioner to the UK. Once Vikramji told me when we were in London, we hosted him at KCL, and he said, we don't want to reinvent the plane. We just want certain seats to be rearranged. And if I think the middle part, the France, India, and all of this, if we can, do some heavy lifting, forget US and China, because we don't have to be in a world where everything has to be done either by the US or China. I think if even middle power stand up, there is a hope for multilateralism. So these are the 2 or 3 configurations.
So India knows what her strengths are. India knows what it brings to the table, and we're just respectable about it. That look, we need our seat at the table.
Yes.
That's all that we're asking for, and we're not, humiliating people in that process. We're just being very dignified about it. But ma'am, you wanted to come in.
Actually, this is a very long discussion and we can go on for hours, but there is a paucity of time. What I want to say is that, as far as India is concerned, we have made it very clear. When I say reformed multilateralism, I didn't want to expand on that. It is about expanding the Security Council, both in its permanent and non-permanent categories. Your point, Chirayu, that, you should form a coalition with some willing countries and move a resolution. That is something that should be explored, has been explored, but you need the political will and commitment for that, because it's a huge process. The threshold to amend the UN Charter is very high. And interestingly, any of the P5 countries can veto the process. So you can move a resolution in the General Assembly, you can be elected also, but finally, the final stage, any P5 country, any one of the five, can veto the entire process. That is why the Charter has not been amended since 1945, except 5 times. It has been amended 5 times. So the important thing is, we should not lose hope. We should, if it is possible, and the political will is there, and it is not just India, you have to move with a coalition of countries. You have to move that process, and that's a huge global outreach. And I'm sure when the time is right, the leadership will take that call. Until then, I'm a strong believer that this will exist. The UN will exist as a signaling platform, as a platform where people discuss, they debate, reach consensus, and sometimes the lowest common denominator solution, actually quite often. And at the same time, the minilateral and plurilateral frameworks also work. They don't have to be mutually exclusive, Shreya. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. They are working today. And I do believe it's a positive development where interests align, and if you can get work done, that's good. The problem arises when some people start saying that multilateralism is not working in toto. As I said, there are 2 United Nations. The Security Council, which is passing fewer resolutions today, granted. The peace and security agenda of the United Nations has failed. But there is also another United Nations, the World Food Programme, UNICEF, and so forth. They are delivering excellent operations on the ground, and most member states of the United Nations, particularly the small states, and I think the former Minister of Sri Lanka also mentioned, we do want the United Nations to exist.
Okay, so on that hopeful note, I think hope is the word that we're taking away from this session. Hope of seeing positive changes, hope of a more aligned world, hope of a community, a global community working together on issues. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much to all my panelists this afternoon.
Shreya, I think India should take the initiative.
India is, sir, and we've been great friends with Sri Lanka, and we really hope that this friendship is strengthened further.
Yeah. No, since Vijayji was asking for inputs, next time the multilateralism panel should have 1.5 hours for discussion,
That's right. Longer sessions, please. We have all of these lovely, wonderful insights coming in, and I'd love to have taken this forward. But like Pam said, there's paucity of time. Thank you very much to all of you for listening to our perspectives, and thank you very much to all my panelists this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shreya. Thank you indeed to all of our speakers as well. If I could request you to please step forward. All of our speakers, we'll have you all just ahead for a quick photo op as well. Another befitting discussion, and with that, ladies and gentlemen, meanwhile, we're about to take a quick tea-coffee break for 10 minutes, and post that, we're about to come back to our keynote panel on artificial intelligence, all that and more. So stay tuned, but first up, please do enjoy the tea and coffee that's being served just behind. So I'm going to urge you all, grab your cup of tea and coffee and more conversations with our speakers as well. But we'll gear up for our next session exactly in 10 minutes.